Welcome back to the Bachelor NEFMC 2021 edition. We will be helping Singapore find suitable policies to help it alleviate the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's meet him.
Hello. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought about a period of unprecedented disruptions. Thus, we're currently looking to consider other possible measures from other countries.
Now let's meet our first contestant, South Korea. Just like Singapore, South Korea is one of the four Asian tigers and has undergone similar patterns of industrial shifts. It boasts a GDP of 1.63 trillion USD.
Hello, nice to meet all of you. To start off, we should introduce our really cool Digital New Deal. This amazing cornerstone of the Korean New Deal that will reduce unemployment and strengthen social safety nets. Under the 58.2 trillion won Digital New Deal, we will expand the integration of 5G and AI into industries that create new markets. The Great New Smart Korea Fund, worth 6 trillion won, that offers vouchers for AI solutions and smart service solutions to small enterprises, is just one of the fun new initiatives we have implemented. The establishment of untech industries, such as online shopping and telehealth, can also shield the country from external shocks, including infectious diseases, by ensuring a stable provision of goods and services. New markets are also created, and a total of 1.9 million jobs are expected to be created. There are also supply-side benefits created by the policies. Digitalization can lower unit costs of production in the long run, lowering cost-push inflation and causing an outward shift in maximum productive capacity, and allows for sustained economic growth during recovery. These reforms are expected to raise potential output by about 8 percentage points.
Next up, we have Fiji, a small island economy very much similar to Singapore. Fiji has a population of around 900,000 and a gross domestic product of 4.376 billion USD, and relies on the tourism and agricultural sector as the main drivers of their economic growth.
Hi everyone, we are Fiji. As mentioned, our economy is highly dependent on international trade and movement, and thus we've been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic just like Singapore. Our government has come up with some alluring fiscal policies which are sure to pump up that aggregate demand. Over the course of the pandemic, our government has rolled out 2 stimulus packages aimed at propping up domestic consumption and investment, with supplemental expenditure on public health and massive tax cuts, increasing total budget by hundreds of millions of dollars. Whilst AD is going up, our interest rates are going down, from 0.5% to 0.25%. It is sure to encourage even more borrowing in order to purchase big-ticket items and consumer durables among Fijians. Furthermore, if we look at the theory of marginal efficiency of investments, a lower cost of borrowing is guaranteed to increase the amount of investments undertaken by our firms. Our government has also put in place a flexible exchange rate policy meant to adapt to the ever-changing crisis. By first depreciating the currency to raise demand for our products, we mitigated the fall in AD, which might have been brought about in the early days of the pandemic. As the situation progressed, however, we undertook a policy of modest appreciation in order to prevent the cost of imports from rising excessively, both to prevent a fall in aggregate supply as well as in the spirit of equity, since many of our poor depend on imported goods for daily needs. As a result of our 3 demand-side policies, our aggregate demand hardly took a hit, and if you choose us and our policies, you'll be back on top in no time.
Thank you, contestants. Let's hear Singapore's thoughts.
Well, I gotta say, I'm impressed by Fiji's triple policy strategy, which is something you don't see every day considering the Mundell-Fleming trilemma. The reason for the ability to do so would be the country's strict control over capital inflows and outflows. Personally, however, I don't think it'll work out. Our open economy has long been touted as an essential pillar for our success. Low restrictions and a competitive tax regime has allowed us to attract high levels of foreign investment for sustained economic growth. As such, we'd have to immediately eliminate Fiji's interest rate policy. The exchange rate policy, on the other hand, seems well suited to the pandemic and to our economy. And finally, my thoughts on the fiscal policy are quite conflicting. On one hand, we acknowledge that keeping our AD up is important, but on the other, our situations are rather different in that our multiplier of 1.38 is much smaller than Fiji's, considering our high marginal propensity to save because of a high precautionary savings motive and mandatory savings schemes such as the CPF. What may work for Fiji might not necessarily meet with as much success domestically, and will much rather focus on our net exports and external facets of our demand. Now, on to Korea. My first thought on the Digital New Deal is that we might not be able to implement digitalization as rapidly as they did, simply because they already have the proper hardware infrastructure for 5G networks, and we just started on that this year. Given that the size of the government expenditure relative to the macroeconomy is rather small, being only 12.4%, we have to turn to large-scale private investment in support to realize a significant growth impact. However, weak investor confidence may deter such investments from taking place. Still, the argument for a policy akin to the Digital New Deal seems highly persuasive post-COVID-19. The Roma growth model postulates that growth is endogenous and innovation-driven. Increasing returns and higher productivity from technological change is enabled by private entities who respond to economic incentives, making initiatives to nurture innovation and digitalization important for growth to be sustained in the long run. Just like Korea, we also have a great potential to capitalize on the shift towards the digitalization of economic activity. The adoption of an additional digital tool in Singapore by firms is associated with an increase in value added and productivity at around 16 to 25%.
We have a match between Singapore and South Korea. And with that, we have come to the end of this episode.